I think I'm on. I always say that each time because it used to tell me, but now it doesn't tell me. Hi, my name is Douglas Griffin. This is my Sunday school class. It's December 31st, the last day of 2023. Uh, Happy New Year to everyone. Hope you have a blessed New Year. Um, Actually, let me restate that. God will be blessing you in the new year. He will be blessing you in the new year. Our job is to discover what He's doing, right? Because God's going to be blessing us. Our job is to go wherever God is leading us, and that's where the blessing is, and that's where the blessing is, and that's where the blessing is. He has the blessings for us. So we pray that we have the direction to discover what it is that God wants us to do, where He wants us to go, what He wants us to say, because there will be blessings for us when we do that. Um, we're in the book of Leviticus. We're in the 12th chapter of Leviticus. Right now, we're doing a chapter a week, which is when we were in Genesis, that was like 3 verses a week. We're doing whole chapters a week in Leviticus. The children of Israel have been brought. Good morning, Susie. To the promised land. No, they haven't. They've been brought to the wilderness on the way to the promised land, and He's preparing them first. In order for you to be successful in the promised land, let me help you understand how to approach me because, hey, Rodney, oh, thank you, sir, and I'll see you church today. Um, you have to learn my ways. That's what I was saying about 2024. We have to learn God's ways because that's where the blessing is. So let me reprogram you because all they had learned for a couple hundred years is the ways of the Egyptian gods. So He's teaching them the things that will keep them alive. He's not covering everything. Even though there's 612 laws, trust me, there are thousands of more He could have discovered. These are the essential things. He's given the essential things so they can have a relationship with Him, so they can have a relationship with one another and not destroy one another and not sabotage themselves. These are things that keep you alive. That's His goal. As time goes by, He will become more specific, more subtle. But it's like a baby. You're just trying to teach them don't grab the electric socket and don't put your hand in the fire. I'll get more subtle later about how you can use fire and wind but for now, I just have to teach you the basics to keep you alive. And that's what He's doing. That's what He's giving them right now. So there are things He's not saying. We're going to get to some chapters. Hello, Marilyn. We're going to get to some chapters soon where you'll be shocked because they've always been taught a certain way. And say, nah, that's not what He's saying. I know that's what we think He's saying, but that's not. He's a anyway. But for now, these are essentials things to keep you alive. Like this chapter, chapter 12. How can I keep mothers alive after they have given birth, considering this is 1200 years BC? Don't have hospitals, don't have all these things. What can we do? Because I need this people to stay alive. They're my chosen people to carry forth the gospel. I'm going to carry the gospel through these people, through the children of Israel, and then spread it out to the world. I don't love them more than everybody in the world, but I have chosen them to be the vessel through which I bring the gospel. So I got to keep these people alive. So Leviticus chapter 12, verse 1 says, Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Speak to the children of Israel, saying, If a woman has conceived, this is what the King James says. Literally, if a woman brings forth seed. It's the same principle we saw in Genesis chapter 1, verse 12, where it says, And the earth brought forth grass, the herb that yields seed according to its kind. So I've designed the earth that grass produces more grass, the seed that will produce more grass and produce more grass. He said, and the trees that yield fruit, whose seed is in itself according to its kind. So I put the actual seed inside the apple, inside the trees that will produce more fruit and continue to produce more fruit, right? And more trees and more trees and more trees. I've created this system, right? And God saw that it was good. So if a woman has brought forth seed would be literal. And sometimes I want the King James to be literal because sometimes the choices that they make, sometimes, like 95% of the time you go, oh, this is so good. 5% of the time you go, that choice doesn't really convey what God was trying to get across. Um, so just to me, just leave it literal and let us figure it out. So if a woman brings forth seed, uh, verse 2, and second part of verse 2, and born a male child. So this is if the woman brings forth a male child, and there's different rules, interestingly, if it's a male child or a female child. Then she shall be unclean 7 days, as in the days of her customary impurity she shall be unclean. Okay, so uh, the idea here is because they didn't understand hospital care. Interesting that in the old days, 100 years ago or whatever, you'd get birth, you'd be in the hospital for at least a week or two. They'd give the mom a chance to recuperate. Now they're trying to get you out. Oh, sorry. Now they're trying to get you out as soon as possible, and because that's expensive. But God is saying she needs 7 days for her body to recuperate. During that time, she shouldn't touch anything, um, and uh, because of infection, all these things. But and God's not able to explain what's infection, what's germs, what's they don't have microscopes, they don't have, so they would know what God was talking about, right? So God's just saying she's unclean for 7 days. Let her rest. Don't touch her. Don't because she's still vulnerable too. So uh, in Numbers chapter 9 verse 6, they use that same phrase. That person's unclean. Uh, So and they want that person to be attended to and cleaned and take special attention because in their normal everyday life, not having paved roads or anything, there's just dirt and weeds and things everywhere. They're not in how you could get infected pretty easily with stuff because you're just out in the wilderness. So the, God had to designate special times where if this happens, make sure you get clean, that you wash, that you stay away from touching, right? Numbers chapter 9, verse 6, it says, now there were certain men who were defiled by a human corpse, so that they could not keep the Passover on that day. And they came before Moses and Aaron that day. Now, um, these are probably the two guys that after Nadab and Abihu were killed, were told to carry the body away. Now, God punished Nadab and Abihu with just normal death. um, but he's trying to establish a rule. If you touch a dead body, since you don't know what they died of, you can't look at them and say, oh, I can look at this person and tell they died of, you don't know. Just don't touch the dead body. If you happen to touch the dead body, you may have contracted or come in contact with whatever disease that killed that person. Don't go around touching everything else. Don't go around spreading that, right? Within most infectious things, that's why after you cough and wash your hands, we're all into washing our hands now. Wash your hands. Of course, we should have been into washing our hands before anyway. But because you're spreading and putting things on surfaces, that's all God is saying. Um, Uh, so there's got to be a period of time where you're washing, where you're very consciously doing that. He could make them wash thoroughly every single day, but he could point out the times. And so saying to this woman, you're vulnerable during this time period. Nobody should touch her. She shouldn't touch anything for 7 days. On the eighth day, Leviticus chapter 12, verse 3. On the eighth day, the flesh of the foreskin of the baby shall be circumcised. Uh, so that eighth day, so seventh day, give the child 7 days, give the mother 7 days, let them relax, recuperate. but the child must be circumcised on the eighth day for a couple reasons. Now, Jesus was, okay, well, for a couple reasons. First of all, it was simply as a sign of the covenant that God was making between God and man. Um, in Genesis chapter 17, verse 11, God comes to Abraham and has said, you are going to be my people and your seed after you, and generation after generation. I'm going to protect you. So here's my part of the deal. I'm going to do all this for you. Your part of the deal is simply to be obedient to my direction, and I'll make you a wealthy people, and I'll bless you, and through you I'll bless other nations. So here's the sign of that covenant. Here's how we will know this is your agreement that each person must make, and each head of the family is making that for his family. And you shall be circumcised, Genesis chapter 17:11, in the flesh of your foreskin, and it shall be a sign of the covenant between me and you. So in one way, it's just you circumcising the child because it's a sign of the covenant. Verse 12 says of Genesis 17, he who is 8 days old among you shall be circumcised. Every male child in your generations, he is born in your house, or bought with money from any foreigner who is not your descendant. Everybody, this is now the sign that I am listening to God. God is not doing this because he's an egomaniac. He's doing this because I need to preserve you alive. And I know all the things that are coming up that might harm you. I know all the invisible things. I know all the snakes in the grass that you don't see. I will be able to keep this people alive. And there are whole groups of people who were wiped out. There are whole groups of people that we have their pottery and we have their, but that whole line is gone. The such and such people who were mighty on the earth and they're gone. Uh, but God, the Jews, the Israelites, children of Israel, God has preserved them through all these generations because they were following his law. So one, it's a sign of the covenant. Uh, Jesus was brought to the temple on the eighth day, Luke chapter 2, verse 21. This persisted, right, for 1,200 years. And when 8 days were completed for the circumcision of the child, his name was called Jesus, the name given by the angel before he was conceived in the womb. Eighth day, we take him to the temple. So Mary, your 7 days are up. It's eighth day. At least take the child to the temple. Then you can go back home and continue to recuperate. But circumcision had more meaning than that. Um, and why don't we have to do it now? We do it today because it's a medical thing, but it's not required, and it's no longer required by God as a sign of the covenant. Colossians chapter 2, verse 11 says, in him you were also circumcised with the circumcision made without hands. So the sign of the covenant, that this was a physical sign, is now a spiritual sign. By putting off the body of the sins of the flesh by the circumcision of Christ. So as a sign, we no longer have to have a physical sign that we are going to be obedient and fulfill our side of the covenant by just being obedient to God. When we confess Jesus as Lord, that's our spiritual circumcision, where we are saying we're going to follow after the Spirit and not after the flesh. So it's a cutting away of the flesh. Symbolic. I need you to cut away some of the flesh, and that's symbolic of your control over your flesh. Your flesh wants to go over and slap that person. Your flesh wants to go over and shoot that person. Your flesh wants to drink all the, but I am cutting away the flesh and not letting the flesh rule me, because my flesh wants to do everything that's going to lead to my death. If you let your flesh rule you, you'll just keep eating until you'll die. You'll keep drinking until you'll die. You'll keep yelling at that person until they shoot you. So you have to let the Spirit rule you so that you may continue to live. So the circumcision was also, the cutting away of the flesh was also just a sign of our commitment to the Spirit as opposed to the flesh. Okay, it was also a health thing. Listen to this. There were studies in 1949 and 1954 that showed a remarkably low rate of cervical cancer for Jewish women because they mostly had husbands who were circumcised. This is back in 1949, 1954, before circumcision was more common in the Jewish culture because their husbands were circumcised. Very low rate of cervical cancer. Uh, so if there were health reasons to do it, because again, people don't know how to, especially men, are not really good with cleanliness. Some are, most are not. It just doesn't occur to them. Women, God put that in them automatically. Clean, I need to be clean. But men, it's like, it's just a little dirt, no big deal. So God says, here's a place where you'll collect dirt and germs, and you won't recognize it, and you'll pass it on to your wife. So this will help. Now, Leviticus chapter 12, verse 4 says, she shall then continue in the blood of her purification for 33 days. So 7 days she's unclean, don't touch anything uh, around the house because you'll be susceptible at that point to infection, right? Because you live in dirt, you live in a wilderness, you don't have drywall. And so let's protect the mother, not have her touch anything because it's actually protecting her. She's not going to infect everything else. She could get infected. However, for 33 days, and the 33 was symbolic. Anyway, for 33 days, you can't go into the temple because now there are two things going on. It's the equivalent of giving the mother, so all of her duties are canceled for 33 days. You have to go and do a sacrifice every day. You have to do all this. No, you don't have to do anything for 33 days. It's the equivalent to maternity leave. It's maternity leave. 33 days, washing, cooking, cleaning. You don't have to do anything, mother. You sit back and do nothing. Uh, all your social obligations done. So, and you get to bond with your newborn child for 33 days. Just you and the child. You're going to be waited on. But there was also a component about the blood, um, which we'll get to in just a second. So, the second part of Leviticus chapter 12, verse 4 says, she shall not touch any hallowed thing, nor come into the sanctuary until the days of her purification are fulfilled. So, you get to rest for 33 days, but also you don't come into the temple for 33 days because of the blood and what I'm trying to teach you about blood. Because the temple is all about blood. The temple is all about we're bringing these animals and shedding the blood. Now, again, God is clearly teaching how important blood is and blood sacrifice, blood. When Jesus says, I will shed my blood, they're like, no, because they didn't get the lesson that God was teaching for 1,200 years, that blood ultimately must be shed for your sin. So when it says that you cannot come into the temple for 33 days, the sanctuary, until the days of her purification are fulfilled, it's not a punishment for having a child. In Genesis 1:28, it says, then God blessed them, talking about Adam and Eve, and God said to them, be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth, subdue it, have dominion over the fish of the sea and over the birds of the air and over every living thing that moves on the earth. Be fruitful and so God wanted people to have children. In fact, Psalm 127, but not that everybody has to have children, but he's not against it. Psalm 127:3, behold, children are a heritage from the Lord. The fruit of the womb is a reward. So God's never saying, you had a child, now I'm punishing you for 33 days. It's not a punishment. It's a lesson about blood. And that's also, it says, just like when the woman was menstruating, um, she's bleeding, there's a loss of blood. And God's trying to put value on blood to them and teach them about the blood of the blood sacrifice and how blood is carried into the temple. In Leviticus chapter 17, verse 11, it says, "For the life of the flesh is in the blood. The blood's what's keeping you alive. Please drain all the blood out and see how long we live." Cut off my fingers. Kind of, unfortunately, I'll still keep going. My feet, you can shave my head, you can cut off my arm, but take away my blood. So the life of the flesh is in the blood, and I have given it to you upon the altar to make atonement for your souls. So I've designated blood's what gives you life. Blood is what you make atonement with for your sin. So without the shedding of blood, death is coming. And so the shedding of blood has a meaning, and the loss of blood when you are bleeding, that has a meaning. So people can't just be bleeding and like, oh, there's some blood. No, well, I'm trying to teach you about blood, and if I let you ignore that, then you won't get the lesson. So when the Messiah comes to die for your sins on the cross and bleeds, you won't get that is what saves you, because you've been just so nonchalant about blood. So once a month when the woman is menstruating, and that blood that would have gone to the child, which instead, uh, because there's no, you know, child in the womb, then that blood that was meant for the child now is coming out. I've got it. That would have given life. Now it's pouring out on the ground. You need a time period away. I'm trying to teach you, first of all, for your own health sake, but secondly, what the blood means. For it is the blood that makes atonement for the soul. Leviticus chapter 17, verse 11. In Genesis chapter 4, verse 10, God says to Cain, "What have you done? The voice of your brother's blood cries out to me from the ground." So his blood being spilt on the ground, there's a crime that's been committed. And I'm trying to teach you about blood. Genesis chapter 9, verse 5. Once Noah has gotten out of the ark and God has judged everybody, he's setting up a new covenant with Noah. The Noah covenant says, "Surely for your lifeblood I will demand a reckoning." I'll have a demand if someone spills your blood. From the hand of every beast I will require it, and from the hand of man. If you spill someone's blood, there'll be a reckoning, there'll be a price to pay. From the hand of every man's brother, I will require the life of man. So do not kill people. You're not allowed to spill someone's blood on the ground. The woman with the issue of blood. For 12 years. She had a period for 12 years. She had a menstruation cycle for 12 years. Continually it wouldn't stop. While you are bleeding, while blood is being spilt on the ground, you're unclean. Now, God's not going to punish you like if you've spilled someone's blood on the ground, like Cain or something. But he's trying to teach that blood being spilled on the ground has to be dealt with, because blood brings life. The blood of the Messiah will bring life. That's why you must come to the temple, and for your sins, blood must be shed. If blood is just coming shed during the menstruation cycle, then the woman is unclean for 7 days, so that you still don't lose your respect for blood. He's making up this rule so that you always think, "Ooh, blood's important." You don't shed people's blood. You don't. Blah, blah, blah. You use blood to atone for sin. I don't ever want you to not think that blood is just, oh yeah, it was just blood. It's no big deal. So this woman has an issue of blood. This story is in the Bible for a reason. So in Luke chapter 8, verse 43, now a woman having a flow of blood for 12 years, who had spent all her livelihood on physicians and could not be healed by any, came from behind and touched the border of his garment, the hem of his garment, the tzitzit of his garment. We think it was the tassels. The scholars think it was the tassels of his garment. And immediately her flow of blood stopped. And Jesus said, "Who touched me?" And when all denied it, Peter and all those with him said, "Master, the multitudes throng and press you. And you say, 'Who touched me?' Everybody's touching you." But Jesus said, "No, somebody touched me. Somebody touched me on purpose. For I perceived power going out from me." Now, when the woman saw that she was not hidden, she came trembling and falling down before him, and she declared to him in the presence of all the people the reason she had touched him and how she was healed immediately. Now, everyone's horrified because when you're on your period, you're not supposed to touch anything. And yet she touched this, because you make the other person unclean while you're bleeding, and now you touch them. So ceremonially, they're unclean. Why would you touch the Messiah? You made him unclean. But she says, "I was healed immediately." And he said to her, "Daughter, be of good cheer. Your faith has made you well. Go in peace." Now, why did she say, "I have to touch the hem of his garment"? Why not his hand or his shoulder? Or because we're thinking in our minds, "Oh, if I just touch the hem as he passes by." No, she aimed for the hem. What was there about the tzitzit, the tassels in his garment, that she thought, "There's healing for me there"? So in Numbers chapter 15, verse 38, it says, "Speak to the children of Israel." This is Numbers 15, verse 38. "Speak to the children of Israel and tell them to make tassels on the corners of their garment." Tassels on the tzitzit, the corners of their garment, throughout their generations. And that word for corners is important. Throughout their generations, and to put a blue thread. So he's thinking of a garment that like has four corners. It's we don't think that a robe has four corners, but that's how they're looking at it. And do it throughout their generations, and to put a blue thread in the tassels of the corners. Now, we know what the blue thread is, because in the temple, there was red representing sin and failure, and then purple, God touching man, and then blue is holy. So in the temple, they knew what the blue thread meant. So put a bit of heaven, put blue thread. Everything is white, but put some blue thread there, because that represents God, right? "And you shall have the tassel," verse 39, "that you may look upon it and remember all the commandments of the Lord and do them." So that's the purpose. In fact, they would tie it in a way that represented the 612, I think it's 612 commandments. And every time you looked at it, this represent what God talking to man and God touching man. So on even though you can't go to the temple and go inside to the Holy of Holies, you can carry a bit of holiness around with you on the tassels of your garment. So I want everybody to do that. So that you will remember all the commandments of the Lord and do them, and that you may not follow the harlotry to which your own heart and your own eyes are inclined. When you see what these other people are doing, your heart and your eyes are really drawn to that. The tassels on your garment will remind you when you look at them, "Oh no, I'm supposed to be following the Lord." Here's a little bit of spirituality, here's a little bit of heaven, there's a little bit of God touching earth. This blue thread of this tassel of my garment. Verse 40, "And that you remember and do all my commandments and be holy for your God." So this represented each person is carrying around a bit of holiness on the tassels of their garment in that blue thread. That's the purpose. It's God talking to man. Now don't forget, it was the tassels on the corners of your garment. In Malachi 4:2, "And the tzitzit," Tzitzit, tzitzit, the fringe of your garment, the fringe at the four corners of the garment. He says, "But to you who fear my name," Malachi 4:2, "for to you who fear my name, the Son of Righteousness," the sun, not like moon and sun, "Son of Righteousness shall arise with healings in its tzitzit," in its corners. Now they translated it wings, healing in its wings, but it's the corners, in its tzitzit. "And you shall go out and grow fat like stall-fed calves." So the Son of Righteousness, when he comes, he'll have healing in his tzitzit. So she's a daughter of the covenant. She goes, I believe that this person is the Messiah. I believe he's the Son of Righteousness. I believe there's healing in his tzitzits, in his the tassels. So that's why she said, if I could just touch his tassels, I'll be healed. And he turned to her and says, daughter, your faith has made you whole. You believe I'm the Messiah. These other people are just brushing against me, but you took a leap of faith. You're not supposed to touch anything. You are unclean. You're not supposed to touch anything, but you took a leap of faith that you would not be thrown in jail. That you said, no, this is the, I believe this is the Messiah, and if I touch his tzitzits, if I touch his wings, the corners of his garment that represent God and holiness, I believe I'll be healed because Malachi 4:2, there said there's healing in the tzitzits, in in the corners of his garments. So when she does that, she's healed. Jesus turns to her, your faith has made you whole. Okay, anyway, so there's always healing for it, but God is teaching a lesson about the blood that's being shed and how and the remedy for that coming to the temple and being cleansed, etc. He's trying to teach them. So in Leviticus chapter 12, verse 5, now here's what's interesting. It says, if she bears a female child, then she shall be unclean for 2 weeks, not one, and as is her customary impurity, and she shall continue in the blood of her purification 66 days instead of 33. Why double for a female child? So you are bringing, there's another thing that's happening with when you bring a child into the world. You are bringing a sinner into the world, and that's why that sinner must be circumcised, a potential sinner. Now, he's going to sin. Jesus was brought in, did not sin, but this each child you bring in must be circumcised because he's going to sin. So you're adding sin to the world. With a male child, with a female child, she's going to bring a child into the world. So it's like double. When you give birth to a female, she's also going to bring a child in to the world. And so she's carrying within her already the seeds of another sinner. So that's double. So whatever you do for the male child, you do double for the female child. Not that females are more unclean. It's the idea that you've brought a sinner into the world with a male child, and with the female child, she's going to bring someone later, and so there's double. So she gets 66 days, you get 33 days, because it's understanding that each one brought in must be purified, must be dedicated to the Lord, must be circumcised. Every child that comes to the world has to then reckon with God. Every child. And no one gets off and, oh yeah, well, but my child's cute, so it's not a sinner. Nope, every child's a sinner. Mm. So Leviticus chapter 12, verse 6. When the days of her purification are fulfilled, whether for a son or a daughter, she shall bring to the priest a lamb of the first year as a burnt offering, meaning he's still a pure lamb. It's a young lamb, a virgin lamb, pure lamb, first year, and a young pigeon or turtle dove as a sin offering. So there's a burnt offering, sin offering, sin offering just in general. Burnt offering covers specific sins. Sin offering just general sin. To the door of the tabernacle of meeting. Then the priest, shall offer it before the Lord, verse 7, and make atonement for her. And she shall be clean from the flow of her blood. This is the law for her who is born a male or a female. So see, it's that simple. You're born a sinner. Now, we're not literally a sinner until we sin. But God's already seen ahead that you're going to sin, right? So you're not, at a certain point, we make a choice like Adam and Eve to defy God, and that's when we become a sinner. But in advance of that, let me just already bless you. Let me already be in covenant with you. I will protect you. Before the child gets a chance to run off, let him already know that I'm connected to him and that his sins are forgiven. So we want to start that from the beginning. Whether it's male or female child, bring the child in, You're cleansed, everybody's cleansed because it's a simple thing. Blood is the cleansing. Leviticus chapter 12, verse 8. And if she's not able to bring a lamb, then she may bring two turtle doves or two young pigeons. So God's making provision for the poor. If you're really poor, it's okay. Bring two turtle or two pigeons because lamb are expensive. One is a burnt offering and the other is a sin offering. So it's okay. You don't have to be rich. But there's pigeons everywhere. So you can just grab two pigeons, bring them in. This is what Mary and Joseph had to do. They were poor. They were the poorest. In Luke chapter 2, verse 22, when they, after 8 days, they went to the temple, it says, now when the days of her purification, according to the law of Moses, were completed, right, her 7 days were up, now it's the 8th day, they brought him to Jerusalem to present him to the Lord. See, this is a sinner, but we're presenting him to you so you can already forgive his sins in advance. We're just starting that cycle of we come to the Lord when we sin. As it is written in the law of the Lord, every male who opens the womb shall be called holy to the Lord. See, God is already wiping your slate clean, but he wants to let them know you're a sinner who needs your slate wiped clean. In our culture, we're trying to teach, followers of the Bible trying to teach, everyone's already drowning. Everyone, and God's throwing you a life preserver to save you. Everyone's already in the burning house, and God's saying, save you. As opposed to everyone is great, everything is wonderful, and then we're deciding, did you sin bad enough to go to hell? And that's where the argument comes on. Well, I'm a good person, and I give to the Red Cross, and I do these good things, so I don't think God's going to send me to hell. And it's the opposite. Everyone is already, because of the separation from God, that's just already, it's a foregone conclusion. God's offering you the rescue. He's trying to say, no, you're already drowning. I'm I'm the one who's rescuing you. It's not, I'm not pushing you into the pool. I'm not sending you to hell. You're already on your way to hell. And this is the lifeline. So that's a concept God's trying to teach everybody. We're not judging people's lives and, oh, you did a bad thing and now you're going to hell. God's saying because of the separation that you're just born into. But it's the simplest thing, the shedding of blood. And it's done, clean, holy, pure. And guess what? Christ already did it. It's done. So the thing that I made them do every day and purify, you don't have to. Christ did it once for all time, done. You just have to believe it. Accept your forgiveness, accept your escape, accept your salvation, accept your rescue. Done. So that's why from the time they're born, they're immediately going to the temple to get purified because he wants to get in people's consciousness. You're now, because of Adam's sin, you've sinned, because of the sin nature in you, you're just born into this. You're going to make that decision to sin. And it's just the first time you go, nah, I don't do that. Done. Right? And so it's not a big sin or a little sin. There's only one person who never ever disobeyed God, the voice of the Spirit, and that was Jesus. All the rest of it just takes one little thing. Done. So since all of you are going to do this, all of us are going to do that, I want to teach you from the beginning that you need salvation. So that's why the child, yes, come on in and get purified, but it's done. It's over. It's done. So they brought Jesus, interestingly, the child who was never going to do it, but he says, I need to fulfill all the law. Doesn't matter if I've sinned or not. I'm going to do everything that God has written in the law. So even as a baby, he's brought in, not because he was going to eventually sin, but because that's the law. Just bring every child in. So they brought him in. This is still Luke chapter 2, verse 24, and to offer a sacrifice according to what is said in the law of the Lord, a pair of turtle doves or two young pigeons. So they didn't have any money for a lamb. They're very poor. They brought in the least that they could do. They brought in either two turtle doves or two pigeons, one for the birth sacrifice, one for the sin sacrifice, burnt offering, sin offering. So Jesus is born into the most lowly of situations. This thing that happened later with the wise men clearly happened after that. Matthew doesn't give us times. Luke does everything in order. Matthew in chapter 2, verse 11 says, "And when they had come into the house, the wise men from the east, from Persia, they saw the young child with Mary his mother, and they fell down and worshipped him. And when they had opened their treasures, they presented gifts to him, gold, frankincense, myrrh." All this clearly happened later because on the eighth day, they're in the temple with two pigeons. That's all they had. Later, they were brought gifts fit for a king because they recognized the king he was to become. Anyway, last verse, Leviticus chapter 12, verse 8. "So the priest shall make atonement for her, and she will be clean." Now, thank God, this is done for all of us, once for all time. But Christ came as a high priest. Hebrews chapter 9, verse 11. But Christ came as high priest of the good things to come, with the greater and more perfect tabernacle not made with hands, that is not of his creation. So Christ is our high priest, just like the woman goes to the high priest and now she's clean. He's our high priest. Verse 12 of Hebrews chapter 9, "Not with blood of goats and calves, but with his own blood he entered the most holy place once for all, having obtained eternal redemption for us all." So we don't have to go through this anymore. It was done once for all sins past, all sins future, anything you'll ever do, you've been forgiven. And all we have to do is accept it. He made it so simple. Our own arrogance says, "Well, I'm not a sinner. I know what you're talking about. I'm a good person." Okay, but it takes 100% perfection to get into heaven. Since we can't achieve that, and even hopefully your own ego doesn't make you think that you have this 100% perfect life. One person did that, and we get in on his grade. We say, well, he did it. He lived that perfect life. He shed his blood for me. So I'm going to accept that was done and get on his. I'm not going to brag about how perfect I am. I'm going to brag about how perfect Jesus is and just say, okay, I'm sure I'm not 100% perfect. So let me accept the salvation that was brought for me. It's a simple thing. It's a very simple thing. Okay, I'm going to finish there. We'll start Leviticus chapter 13 next week. Happy New Year. I hope that you are blessed. Well, no, again, you will be blessed in the new year. I hope that you are able to discover the places where God has laid out all the blessings for you, like an Easter egg hunt. And your parents go out and they put all the Easter eggs all over. And of course, if you're Jewish, this means nothing to you. Oh, but when you run to the house looking for the geld, anyway, God has just hidden all these wonderful blessings for us. Not hidden so we can't find them. It's easy to find them. We just have to be obedient each morning to his voice. And there's a blessing when we talk to this person or give here or go there. There's blessings waiting for us. And in the new year, there's 1,000 blessings waiting for you, exceedingly abundantly above all you can ask or think. God has blessings waiting for you in the new year. And it only takes our obedience to his voice to find them. So I pray that we all do that in this coming year. And I will talk to some of you on Wednesday where we're in the book of Luke. Okay, thank you so much, and God bless you. Bye-bye.